video, I hope that I'll be able to bring some clarification as to why I always say no when asked if I teach portrait painting. Reason being that I don't know how I do what I do. Honestly, I never thought that I could paint portraits, and so I really surprised myself when I ventured out and attempted to do them. So this video is by no means a step-by-step or how-to tutorial for those wanting to learn portraiture, but rather a guide and encouragement to anyone willing and ready to step outside their comfort zone and dare to try something new. Who knows, you might just surprise yourself too as to what you're capable of doing. The biggest piece of advice that I could give anyone wanting to try portraits is to just do it. Quit standing in your own way and just attempt it. What do you have to lose? It's paint. It's paint and a canvas or paper or whatever it is that you're painting on. It's not a threat. No one's life is depending on this masterpiece for you to create. As adults, we often forget how to create in a childlike manner. We forget to be bold and fearless in our creations. We don't get a lot of playtime. We don't allow ourselves the grace and the time and the space to just create without expectations. I think that art is such an important part, an aspect of our lives, and especially our mental health, because there's so many demands and responsibilities and expectations on us. And we need this to be able to disconnect and to renew our minds and our spirits and to bring out that inner child in us that's not seeking to please or to prove themselves or to be successful. They're just playing. So if there's one thing that I hope you guys draw from this tutorial, it's the courage to go out and to create in that childlike manner. All right, so enough of that. Let's get into what I'm actually doing here. So I think it's important to mention that when I first started portrait painting, I used to project or trace my images onto the canvas. I didn't trust in my abilities to be able to sketch it out beforehand. And I knew myself well enough that if I went with a pencil or an eraser onto the canvas, that I would sit there for hours on end trying to sketch the perfect face and have everything perfectly positioned before I would pull out the paints. I knew that I would either get bored and never even make it to the paint, or I would be so hard on myself and get so discouraged that I wouldn't even attempt it. So projecting the image onto the canvas just really allowed me to have the composition of my piece, and then I would just go in with the paint and start blocking in my highlights and my shadows and go from there. I also never had an understanding on how to properly mix flesh tone colors. I would just grab colors that I thought made sense to me and I would just start mixing them together. Even to this day, when I look at a reference picture, I still don't recognize specific colors or tones. I don't say like, oh yeah, that's Naples yellow, or that is crimson red mixed with a little of burnt umber and yellow ochre. Yeah, no, that's so not me. I just go for it. I do have a book that goes into great detail in mixing flesh tones, as well as how to get the right values and shades in the highlights. But I have no patience, and I'm ADD, and so the book just sits there on my bookshelf and I never reference it. I probably should. But most times when I sit down to paint, I have about an hour window before I either get bored or distracted, or I have to tend to the kids. So I don't want to waste half or most of that time reading a book and trying to follow a color mixing recipe. So yeah, here I am squirreling off and totally getting off track again. Sorry. Okay, back on track here. So the projecting was a really good starting point, and I highly recommend it to anybody who maybe needs that extra little push to try. I mean, you could do that with a reference picture. That doesn't have to be a portrait. It could be a landscape, could be a still life, anything really. If you don't feel comfortable enough with going right onto the canvas with a paintbrush or sketching it on first, get a projector, project your image. There's nothing wrong in doing that. Some people feel like it's cheating, but I don't think so. You find whatever works for you and go with it. No apologies. Okay, but when I started painting, going right in with the paintbrush and skipping the outline first, I found it terrifying, but also very liberating, because all of a sudden I didn't feel boxed in. I didn't feel like I had to stay within the confines of the sketch that I had put onto the canvas. I found that it really helped train my eyes to see shapes and to see the colors and to see the values in those colors. It also forced me to step back from my work from time to time with my reference picture in hand and go, okay, something's off about this painting. What is it? And so that troubleshooting that I had to do really increased my understanding of those shapes and what I was seeing. And the more I practiced doing it this way, the faster I became in my portrait paintings, and the less time I spent correcting the composition of my faces. I think the other important part to mention here as well is that a lot of my paintings go through a really ugly stage. And I know for myself, I've watched a lot of other artists creating their portraits, watching them through fast time, and you could tell right off the bat that it was going to be an amazing, because they went right into great detail of the eye and then into the great detail on the nose, and everything came together so beautifully. And mine tend to go through this ugly ogre alien stage before it turns into a beautiful portrait. And so because of that, I was always afraid of painting in front of people as well, because I thought if anybody comes close to me in the beginning stages to see what I'm doing, they're going to look at it and go, what is she painting? I'm not sticking around and watching this because it's just hideous. But it's part of the process. It's part of my process. And it's beautiful, and I wouldn't change it for the world. All right, so the color that I use to sketch the composition was yellow ochre. I don't think it really matters the colors that I used here. I can put them down in the description of the video if anybody's curious. But again, the colors that I'm using really don't matter because they change from one portrait to the next. I really just experiment. There are certain colors that I use in every portrait, but like I said, my color mixing varies from one painting to the next. So I start with sketching on the yellow first, and then I usually go in with my darkest darks, and then I start to go in with my medium tones and then my lighter ones. You can see here that I'm using my phone as well. I like using my phone for the reference picture because it allows me to zoom in versus having an actual photograph in front of me, unless it's a large one, an 8x10 or larger. I can zoom in on those details. So often when I get commission work, people just send me through Messenger or email the picture of their loved one or their pet, and I just go off of that. Obviously, if you are going to try using the projector, then you'll have to print out your image or have a 4x6 picture. But otherwise, a phone or tablet works really well. I know a lot of artists use their laptop, which makes even more sense because your image is going to be a lot bigger. So I don't know why I don't use my computer. It would probably make my life a whole lot easier, but such is the story of my life. I tend to do things the hard way. I'm sure some of you guys can relate to that one. Anyways, this portrait, I did it in, I believe, 3 or 4 sittings. So I've combined a few clips here to show you guys the process of it. So you'll see the canvas skip and probably the lighting change. But I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video here so that you're not sitting here watching a couple hours of footage. So I hope you guys enjoy the process. I hope you find encouragement from this video. If you have any questions about it, then feel free to put your questions in the comments down below and I will get back to you, or you can email me at any time. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear what you guys thought. So here we go. Enjoy. think another important thing to mention about my process is how I go back and forth from different areas on my paintings. And that's not just when I'm doing portraits, but any painting that I'm working on. I'll work in one area a little bit and then I'll let that dry and I'll go and work on another area. I think it also helps me to not get so frustrated and bored when I'm working on something and it doesn't seem to be coming together the way that I would hope for. Then I'll go in and I'll add my background. And often when I add my background color, it changes the look of the other pieces that I've painted so far. So don't get fixated on one particular area of your painting before you move on to the next. I think it's important to know when to walk away and when to come back. And oftentimes, when you go and you start working on another piece or another area in that piece, when you come back to the one that was frustrating you see it with fresh eyes, and you might pick up right away on what's wrong with the composition or the shading or the color. So it's important to go back and forth and not to get hung up on any details that may be stumping you. Just go for it. Trust the process. It's all about experimenting. Every time you pick up your paint and your paintbrush, it's a fresh opportunity to learn and to grow. So when you look at it from that way, it becomes a lot less threatening and a lot more enjoyable. All right, so we are approaching the end of this video, and I just wanted to hop back on here to mention another important detail. Sometimes when we get to the end of our painting, we might feel like it's not working, or that, I've just spent 3 hours on this painting and I thought I was going to be done in one, and it's just not working with the vision that you had. It's important to walk away. And sometimes when you come back the next day, or maybe you share it with a friend or a loved one to see their opinion, you start to see that, oh, I think this actually is finished. Or, you know what, I think I only have one or two tiny details and then I'm done. When you spend a few hours staring at a piece that you're working on, you're not stepping back to look at the full picture. And I think that a lot of that goes with real life as well. It's about perspective. When we're in the middle of chaos, it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's hard to find that silver lining. But when we step back and we look at things from a grander scale, it changes our perspective. We see the value in things. We begin to see everything that's going right and not focusing on the things that are frustrating. And a lot of those details that we get hung up on are usually ones that nobody else is picking up on. We are usually our own toughest critics. So be kind with yourself and open your mind to hearing other people's input. And when people are telling you that it looks amazing and it's done, believe them and listen to them, because they're probably right. And I'm preaching to the choir here, okay? So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope that you guys will find the courage to step out of your comfort zone and try something new. See you guys next time.